What can you do to turn stress around and make it more beneficial in your life? Turns out a lot. Stick around because this is what we're talking about on episode 101 of the Air Hug Community Podcast. Hey, welcome everybody. If you are new here, and if you're not new here, welcome back. But if you're new here, I just want to give you the 411 on this podcast. This is the Air Hug Community Podcast, and you can also think of it as a midlife mojo discussion board. So in this podcast, we come together to talk about midlife. We talk about the good, the bad, the ugly, all the emotions. We talk about approaches for living better. We talk about all sorts of things. We bring in guests. And this is just something that was created as a need out of my business from Grateful Fitness of working with women. I wanted to have a place where we could come to talk about things further. And so this is the place. Welcome. I'm glad you're here. Let's get after it. Hey there. All right. I am really excited about this episode. It's just me today, but I've done a little bit of research, and this stemmed from an episode that I did a few episodes back. It was episode 97, and we talked a lot about the negative effects of stress and the stress hormone cortisol, and how even in a calorie deficit, an imbalance of stress hormone can actually make you hold on to weight. But I wanted to be fair and make sure that we also covered the benefits of stress, because stress is a natural response. So let me start out by asking you to consider a question. And I think in this world, a lot of us, a lot of times, can see things as very binary. They are either right or wrong, or black or white, right? And, if it's a traffic light, that's great because it's either green or red. And if it's yellow, you know that it's going to be red very, very soon. So that's very either or type. But in real life, most things in real life are on a continuum, as in how much, there's one end and then there's another, and then there's a whole bunch of little points in between those two ends, a continuum, if you will. So I set out to learn a little bit more about stress and not think of it as either all good or all bad, but on a continuum. And it turns out that we can actually do that. So I found a researcher who has actually done a lot of work with stress, and her name is Daniela Koffer. I'm going to call her DK. But she's a researcher at UC Berkeley, and I found a fascinating interview that she did with someone. Where was it? It was in a research-based newsletter. So anyways, it's really interesting because stress is not at all bad all the time. And of course, obviously, it's not good at all the time. But what is the purpose of stress? Maybe we should start there. I think that's a great place to start. So stress is actually a response that we have to help us react in a potentially threatening situation, right? It helps us to deal with that situation and learn from it. For example, a child learns not to touch a hot stove or a flame. So research now shows that moderate, short-lived stress, I'm already going to get tongue-tied today, actually has benefits. And yes, there's a number of benefits that I want to talk about today, 5 of them. There may be more, but I'm limiting it to these 5 today because these are the ones that I actually was able to get some information on. So, manageable, short-lived stress can actually help improve our alertness. So think about when you're driving. Now, most cars, they're not smart cars. I don't know what you want to call them, but they have these sensors, and the road lines on the expressways have these sensors. And if you cross that line, or they have the bumps on the road, the ridges, your car will kind of alert you and let you know. Like mine makes a little beep, but even if it doesn't, like on the New York State Thruway, for example, there's those ridges. If you cross over to those ridges, if like you're drifting, you're going to get that audible alarm. And it is very stressful, but all of a sudden you're going to be more alert. So that's what we're talking about. All right, stress also can help improve our performance in many things. So, how does this happen? Well, this is with the third thing. Manageable stress, alertness, and performance happen because when we have manageable stress, we actually increase the number of stem cells, which ultimately become brain cells. So this does improve our alertness, it improves our performance, and it also improves our memory. So that's the fourth thing. So think about a predator, all right? In prehistoric times, maybe you're something that a lion eats, I don't know, a rabbit, and I can't remember what lions eat, like pretty much everything, right? They're at the top of the food chain. But let's say you're something that a lion eats. Well, okay, a person. You need to remember where and when and what and how you encountered that lion so that you can avoid it for the next time. So you're going to remember when you were in that threatening situation of seeing a lion. Okay, so modern day today, maybe you're living in a city. You want to make sure that if you're in a dark alley, you remember not to go there again because that can be a threatening situation because you don't know if a thug is going to be there, right? Or a rat, right? Or if you're in my backyard, a snake. Actually, the snakes are harmless, but I do have this perception of them being disgusting and I can't stand them, but that's besides the point. Okay, stress also, manageable short-lived stress, I want to make sure I say that, also can improve your immune response. Yay, well, we all want to have better immunities, right? In this day and age, no doubt about that. So here's the thing, and this is a beautiful thing. Our brains are constantly responding to stressors. And the not so beautiful thing is that when they are extreme and chronic, as in unresolved, we will get a negative effect. But when they are moderate and brief and manageable, we actually have improved cognitive ability. So we actually benefit from short-lived, moderate, manageable stress, okay? But what is the tipping point here? When is too much, and when is enough, right? Well, as with most things that we are exposed to, it varies quite a bit upon the individual. So it's very unique to each of us. And one unique thing about it is our perception. So our perception so how we perceive stress is a huge factor in this whole puzzle. All right. So, but there are other factors that we can talk about. All right. So one factor in how we can better manage our stress is how resilient and confident we are in our ability to actually manage a stressful situation. So if we feel like we are resilient and we have the confidence and to know that we can get through this, right? To know that we can manage ourselves through a stressful situation, the more resilient and confident we are, the better we are going to be able to manage it, right? It's kind of, if you think you can, you can. And if you think you can't, you can't. Whatever you think is your reality. Another factor that affects how well we can manage stress and whether we're going to get positive or negative effects from it is how much control we have over a situation. If we have no control over it and we actually harbor it and think about it and really simmer on it, we're more likely to have negative effects from it. Okay, but if we do have some control over it, for an example, a tight deadline, which you have some control over versus one where you have no control over, you're more likely to manage it, get through it. Yes, it will be stressful, but it'll be manageable, and you're more likely to reap the positive effects from it. A third factor, and I found this one to be really, really interesting, especially for those of us who have either been parents or been in a family or have some history that concerns us, is that early life experiences clearly shape how we respond to stress. And this is based on a study of Holocaust survivors. And what was found was that their stress hormones measured much higher than non Holocaust survivors. And siblings of Holocaust survivors also tested very high in stress hormones. So, what we now know is that stress experiences in early life make us more vulnerable to stress later on in life. And so, yikes, right? We can't do anything about our past, but it is just something to be wary of. So, one of the things that came to mind, what to me when I did a lot of this thinking and research about this, was that book Unbroken by Laura Hildebrand. So the main character in the story, and I'm 97% sure this is a true story because it's about Louis Zamperini, and he's from Olean, New York, which is southwestern New York, a few hours from here. But I found this to be a fascinating story. If you don't know the story, he is a rising star, an Olympic caliber runner, and he ends up in World War II. Ultimately ends up as a terribly tortured Pacific POW. And that trauma lasted for years. In fact, I remember at one point in the story, they talked about how he couldn't even look at a bowl of rice because for some time while he was being tortured, I think the only thing he was allowed to eat was rice. And so it has such a horrible had such a horrible, stressful response in him. But later on in his life, he really struggled to reclaim his existence in a happy way. In fact, he struggled with addiction. He struggled through so many things, and it was really a heartbreaking story in many ways. And his stress, from his POW situation clearly, he clearly had PTSD, affected him for the rest of his life. But anyways, that's what I'm talking about. So let's move on a little bit to talk about how stress affects our body. So I just want to spend a little bit about this, and then we're going to go into what we can do to make stress more beneficial, according to DK, the researcher I talked about just a few minutes ago. So how can stress affect our body? It can constrict our blood vessels, which means that it can actually contribute to cardiovascular disease because we don't want tight constricted vessels, right? Then we're not going to get blood flow where we need blood flow. And if we don't have blood flow, we're going to have tissue injury, possibly even death. Okay, so it can also suppress our immune system. Now, if you remember at the beginning, I talked about how manageable a stress can actually enhance our immune system, but chronic, excessive, unmanaged stress can actually suppress our immune system. It can also suppress fertility, libido, and increase the risk for miscarriage. Yike! So it's really important, I think, that we learn how to make our stress manageable and deal with it. And that's the whole point of today's conversation. So what can you do to make stress more beneficial in your life? And according to Daniela Kay, there are several things you can do. One is, and you know what? You may think that this is like so overthought and overused, but I got to tell you to just take a step back and absorb this and listen to this because it's really important. And I think we overlook these things. Maybe sometimes I think we want to overlook them because it's some people like to be miserable. But that's a different conversation. I don't like to be miserable. I'm very happy to have learned what we can do to make stress more beneficial in our lives, and I'm eager to share it with you now. So, number one, what we can do is adopt a positive attitude. And the reason I went into this is because I know you probably think, yeah, everyone says this. But guess what? Yeah, it's super important to hear it repeatedly. So if you have a self-confidence self-confident sense that you can get through a rough period, the fact is you're going to get through that rough period. So it goes back to what I spoke about. If you believe you can, you can. And I know this is not like flipping a switch. It's a term I like to use a lot. This is something where you actually have to do the work and kind of cultivate that sense of a positive attitude and confidence in yourself. And it takes time and it takes effort. All right, but you can do it. You can get through it, So, what can you do to help with this? I always like to call these numbers, but really, after a positive attitude as one. Number two, use social support. It will help with your positive attitude and it will help you manage stress. So, it's very interesting. Friends and family do buffer stress. Social support buffers stress. Kind of intuitive, right? Well, guess what? Now there's actually research to back it up, and we're starting to understand this biologically, that friends are important. How do we know that? Because social support actually releases a hormone called oxytocin. And oxytocin is the body's natural, you guessed it, stress reliever. Yay! And guess what? Oxytocin is enhanced by social contact and social support. So I always say this, friend time is important time. And you know what? It's important to be both a giver and a receiver of friendship. Just keep that in mind. All right. The third thing that you can do is engage in physical exercise. Yet another reason to exercise that has nothing to do with weight loss. So, physical exercise in rodent studies shows that being allowed to exercise makes people more likely to create new brain cells in response to stress compared to those who were sedentary. So, wait a minute. You can exercise to get smarter? Yup, it's a thing. It's true. So, add that to your list of why you're going to exercise consistently. And here's another thing. Physical activity after a stressful experience has been shown to help moderate the effects of negative stress. So that's a really good reason to maybe have a workout after a stressful day. Let's say you tend to have stressful days at work. One of the best things you can do is put on those exercise clothes and go rock a great workout. For whatever that means to you. So let's review this, all right? How can we make stress more beneficial in our life? Number one, we can cultivate a positive attitude and have the confidence and resilience to know that we can manage through stressful situations most of the time, or at least more often than what we have been. Number two, we need to know what we can control. In the situations that we can control, we will manage a little bit better. We know that they will be manageable and we will reap the more positive effects. So, and you know what? A word to that, if it's something we can't control, a big thing we have to do is learn to accept it and not frizzle over it, Just if it's something that you can't control, such as raining on your wedding day, you can't control that, or some other uncontrollable event. You can't change it, so don't overthink it, Control the things that you can control, change them if you can, and accept the things that you can't. Another underlying theme that we talk about here a lot on the Air Hug community, and all of that right now that we just talked about is a summary of the Serenity Prayer. One of my favorite things to go back to, especially when I'm feeling myself to be very tight and stressful in my brain, and I have to just stop and say, what's going on? Can I control this? No. Can I control this? Yes. Okay. If I can control this, I'm going to do it with a positive attitude. And if it is something like that that's bothering you, you know what? Pick up the phone, call a friend, make a friend date, or use your significant other. Whatever it is, social support is important. And the last thing, number 4, sweat it out, right? Use exercise to your advantage. Think of exercise as a stress buster. I'll tell you, for me and for so many of the people I work with, 100% of the time they walk out of the gym feeling more relieved than they did when they walked in. Not only have they accomplished a great workout, but they actually have released the endorphins that are stress reducing as well. So we want to release those endorphins. We want oxytocin from our social support to actually help us get through these things. And we just need to know that not all stress is bad. Even just acknowledging that, it's like, okay, is this manageable or not manageable? Can I control it or not? Now we have the tools to know how to work with this. So I hope that you enjoyed this episode. I certainly did. If you want more information on midlife exercise or female exercise, feel free to reach out to me with a DM. I'll pop that in the show notes, how you can contact me. And I hope that this really helped you to take a different look at the stress in your life so that you can live better. Because, hey, I would like for you to be more alert, perform better, have better memory, and grow more brain cells. Wouldn't we all? Absolutely. All right, take care. You've been listening to the Air Hug Community Podcast, and I want to thank you so, so much for tuning in. It actually means a lot to me that you would take these minutes each week to come in and listen to topics that seem to pop up so often for midlife women.